Hey, Chris, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Of course. This is your third time now on the show. I think that's a record.
I'm going for 30. I'll settle for 3 today though.
All
So
right, cool. Yeah, if we just recorded every conversation, I'm not going to lie. Like if I get the chance to ask Chris to come back on the show, I'm just excited because I get to talk to you, even though like we're both busy. You got a little one and another on the way. So your time
we
is
do.
valuable and I appreciate you being here.
I'm grateful for it too. I always have fun talking with you, and I'm sure everybody listening, they have peers that they can, move at their normal speed with, and it's so
Mhm.
refreshing to not have to slow down or even pull any punches.
Yeah, and if you're like me, you're listening to the podcast on 1.5x on top of that,
While you're
even
doing
better.
something else. Yeah.
Yeah, even better. And what I wanted to, and this is so funny because Chris and I connect, and then it's like, you should come on the show again. And it's like, what are we going to talk about? Literally anything, because I know we have a good conversation. But what was coming up when we were chatting before we hit record was around the fact that you're a life and business coach, right? I'm a CFO for growing businesses. I feel like we work with the same people in different dimensions of their lives or different ways. And uniquely, both of us are positioned in a way where we see people behind the curtain. Like a lot of
Mhm.
people are exposed with us and we can see their numbers or, and I'm sure you ask for their numbers too, but we see what they're really struggling with as long as they're being authentically honest with us. And I want to start with that. I know this is a challenge with clients of ours. How do you
Mhm.
extract that honesty and develop that relationship with clients, especially those who are a little bit more guarded when it comes to, you go through some of the hard things with them and really challenge them?
Great question. I think it's a matter of rapport and permission. So
Mm.
rapport, you've probably had somebody in your world before where they asked you a question and they wanted to know like maybe about your income, and you didn't really trust why they were asking that or their motive behind asking that, and so you were vague in your response or general in your answer. With coaching, like we have to be in a mutual state of trust and respect, and I just won't even ask the questions if I don't have that yet. So we just have to be on the same page there that look, you can trust my motive. You can trust my questions are not based in judgment, they're based in curiosity for your betterment. And what was the second thing I said? I already moved on. Uh,
Rapport
rapport and
and
permission. Permission.
permission.
So the other thing is sometimes, like if I have somebody who might be getting a little guarded or combative, I just have to ask them, like, hey, I see something based on my experience. Is it okay if I point it out? Or, hey, I'm noticing a pattern here. Would it be all right if I show you the pattern? And what do you think most of the time they're going to say?
Of course, they're going to say yes because, well, number one, they're paying you probably to tell them these things that they can't see, but they also want to extract that out of you because now there's curiosity too.
Exactly. And because what else are we doing here if not trying to find some new answers and find a new way? And, my style of coaching is I want them to see it for themselves and self discover. I took a person through an exercise on our mutual friend Brian's group call the other day. And this woman had about 4 or 5 businesses that she was operating in. And I had her go through and put them to a scale of 0 to 5. 5 was high. How much joy did each business bring her? And we got our numbers for each of the businesses. And then we came back and I said, all right, same thing, scale of 0 to 5. 5 is high. How much income do these businesses bring you? Only one of the 5 ranked a 4 out of 5 or higher on both categories. The rest were 2 out of 5 on both categories. So did I even have to ask the next question? Right? Like she could see plain as day, here's what's going on. So all I had to ask was, what stands out to you here? She's like, I gotta get out of these other businesses. So it's that simple on the face of it. But I think for people to get over the hurdle of being able to trust somebody, they have to own it, right? They have to own it enough to say, look, I got to do something different and it's got to be up to me, but maybe this person has something that I can use to get me there.
I agree. And it's not just trusting your expertise and your experience, but they have to trust your intention.
Yes. Yes.
That's key because I think where people can get guarded, and also from my standpoint with the financials, is they don't know what we're using it for. They're also embarrassed to some extent to share. It's like asking, like, what do you weigh? What do you make? It's things that you don't want to share because you're like, I don't want you to judge me. Right. Yeah. Do you ever feel like clients are afraid that you're going to judge them if they reveal something? Are they ever embarrassed to share something with you?
They are embarrassed sometimes, but only in the beginning, I'll say too, because they haven't learned how we receive that. I say we because I have another coach that coaches with me. I'll say this, that once they have that first transformation or breakthrough because of coaching, there's no going back. And like we always say, champions crave accountability. They want to improve. They want to get feedback and say, hey, here's how this could be done a little more effectively. Cool, thanks. Let me give it a shot. Oh, wow, that worked. I'm going to keep doing that. Because everybody listening right now and everybody that we work with, we are challenge oriented. We don't want to take the easy route. So if we're going to seek these challenges, it's always going to be a certain level of difficulty. But that means we have to become more effective at each level we rise up. So I think they get that inherently. And then I think they kind of get bitten by coaching in a good way, that they can't go back once they experience a transformation that came on the other side of them being vulnerable or being willing to share something. And I mean, I've had clients tell me there's probably nothing you could tell me that I haven't heard. I mean, everything from a client falling out of the attic of his house because he was over drinking and almost broke both of his legs. And it took that point to get him to tell me about it. I didn't even know it was happening until that moment. And he realized, okay, I gotta share this. And he's been sober for 3 months and doing great. And that's just one of the many examples, because yeah, it's life and business coaching. They permeate each other constantly.
Yes.
And we can't pretend to separate one from the other completely, because who we are in life is how we show up in business. So I think, yeah, and I'll also say that there is something about the people who truly want to be their best or operate at their highest level. They know they're going to have to get their hands dirty with their own bad habits or with skills that are not as sharp. And it takes just 1 ounce of courage to get into that coaching container or conversation. And from there, then the ball starts rolling.
Yeah. And I find that, when they find success, whether it be in business or life in general, we'll say in wealth, when they find success, they figure whatever I'm doing is working and I don't need any other help. Or they don't have that sort of hunger for this coaching, right? Do you find like what is the pattern that you tend to see when it comes to people who are approaching you and where they're currently at when they realize they have to pick up that hotline and call you and say, I definitely need your coaching?
I think they always have a sense of burnout. Maybe not complete burnout, but there's this sense of frustration that I keep hitting the same walls over and over. And I'm so freaking tired of it, right? Like I'm just not willing to do it anymore. And that's a real gift, that moment, because then it becomes a must. And I must change. I must pick up the phone. Before we got started here today, a client sent me a voice note and he said it took him, I think, 2 years from our first conversation to come around to hiring me. And he said, I know in my mind, I wanted to hire you back then when we first spoke. And it took me that long to get up to get the courage up to call and do it. But I'm just so tired of doing the same things over and over. And I think that's it, right? Is we need to hit that point, especially as people in business, because we're used to doing hard things. So we'll keep doing hard things for longer and longer and longer until somebody else shows us there's a better way.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go, oh, okay. So yeah, I think there's always that sense of I'm unwilling to keep doing it the hard way, the frustrating way, the stressful way. And there's got to be a better way because other people are out here doing it. And as soon as they want to find out more, that's the opening. That's the only opening we need.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that we look at from a CFO standpoint is one of the qualities in our ideal client. And I actually coach my team through this and say, this is who we want. Like this is the ideal client of ours. And it's not just industry niche and all that stuff, but this is the type of person and where they're at, where we can be of the most service to them. And one of the qualities is coachability, because it's so important. But that begged the question, because I was thinking about this and going, that's why coachability is like a key character trait of a potential client. So when my employees or my other clients are out there scouring, we'll say, or they come upon somebody, they're like, oh, they have like the 3 traits that Shannon said she wants. And we educate people on that. But coachability, it's also hard to define and hard to explain to people. How do you define coachability in your business?
It is hard to define. I think the first thing I look at is their track record. Does their track record suggest that they are a performer, a high performer, somebody who's willing to go to the next level? Like I always use my wife as the example, because she was chosen for a leadership camp as an early teenager. She was had a 4.0 all through school. She was the captain of her volleyball team at D1 volleyball. She started her own business. Like everything in her track record shows me this is somebody who wants to perform at a high level. So that's sort of the baseline of, if they're coachable, there has to be some undercurrent of that. And then it's the willingness to receive feedback with the goal of improvement, right? Like I can get feedback all day long on Twitter or wherever else and do nothing with it, right? And there's a difference between that and somebody who solicits the feedback with the sole intention of, I am going to take this and import it into my life, into my business, and immediately make some kind of change, some kind of shift in how I think or act. So no, I don't know if there is a succinct way to put that, other than they show up with a solid track record, suggesting that they are open, and then in their conversation and in their actions, they show you they're willing to take that feedback and implement it to improve.
Yeah, and that's key, because we want results for our clients. And in order for those results to happen, there's only so much we can do. You know, people, they you don't show up to a personal trainer and the personal trainer gives you abs. Like, you have to put the work in. And it goes the same way with coaching and the same way with what we do. And that's why I relate to Chris so much in this, because I'm like, yes, because the client has to show up and do the work. And you want to have a client who's like a lifelong learner and ready to go and ready to take action, and they're committed. But that is also it's almost hard to cultivate that commitment in clients that don't have it. If they don't come to the table with that commitment, it's very hard to almost convince them that this is what they need.
In my early days of coaching, I took 1 or 2 clients who, it was a risk. I knew it was a gamble from the very beginning, because there was this looseness in their language, and they wouldn't necessarily commit. And they would say things like, well, I tried to make the call on time, right? Now, I can reform some behavior, and I can definitely reform many thoughts that lots of entrepreneurs have. What I cannot always reform is the unwillingness to see it, right? And in our world, we call it leverage. We have to get a long enough lever to sort of force them to take an honest look at it. So like with one of these clients, he kept trying to convince me that he was doing everything that I was asking him to do, and it wasn't working, and he wasn't making more money, and he wasn't feeling happier. And I said, hey, that's okay. Let's just write down what you have done in the last week since our previous call. Nothing, right? In his mind, he had told this story that he was doing all these things and really working hard and showing up, being coachable. In reality, that wasn't actually what happened. That was the leverage that I needed to show him, oh, I'm not actually being coachable, or at least I'm not taking the action I'm promising to take in between these 2 calls. And yeah, I mean, we have to get creative sometimes with that. But I don't think leaders are born necessarily, or the most coachable people are born that way. I think they just have a burning desire to improve, and they'll do whatever it takes to hit the next mark.
I agree. It reminds me of we kind of have these like core truths in our business as opposed to core values. We have core values too, but I love the core truths because they're phrased in the form of statements. And one of our statements is, we cannot care more than the client. So once we care more than the client does, or we perceive that we care more than the client does, it is broken, because we can't force them to care about their money, because if we care more than they do, then there's an imbalance. This is not going to end well.
Yeah. It's a delicate balancing act, because sometimes I find I have to care more than the client about their results and be willing to go further. In our world, we say you have to risk the relationship sometimes. Like I
Yep.
will, like one of my top clients, we've been together for 4 years coaching. I will have to sometimes interrupt him and say, "Do you trust me?" And he knows that's the cue. I'm about to drop a pretty heavy question or reflect something back to him that he's doing or not doing that's going to sober him up from that action. And it's a risk, because if I tell him and it's true and he takes it personally, yeah, he could leave. He could write a bad review about my coaching. He could do all kinds of things. But we have to care enough to take a stand for them and their greatness in that moment, even if that does mean temporarily caring more than they do. Now, I agree, on a long enough timeline, we can't always be showing up for them and making excuses for them. And sometimes the highest form of caring for them and their results is holding them accountable and showing them, hey, look, you're really operating so far below where you could be. And like I said, those champions out there, they want that feedback.
Yeah. And it is a delicate balance, because we also don't want to put ourselves in the position, me and my employees, where we're working harder than they are for their own results.
Yeah.
That they also have to be an active participant and a collaborative team member in their results. Because if you're doing all of, quote unquote, the work, I guess I have a little bit more of the physical work involved in it too, right? So if we're doing more of the work and we're getting nothing out of them, I'm like, then this is not a fun relationship. Like, this isn't a conversation. It's one directional. And that's one thing that I don't think business owners enough kind of draw that boundary. And especially service-based business owners like myself, they don't put it out there. They're just like, we just put up with it. And if you can say, like, no, we cannot care more than the client does, and you'll realize how many people you're doing that to. And you'll realize how many times you've let yourself care more than they do, and then take that burden on yourself for their outcomes. And that's where it gets a little bit more burning out, because for me, I did that my whole career basically. And it was quite unhealthy to then attach my own work to their outcome.
It's dangerous. And you're always training them how to treat you.
Yes.
So you do have to be careful. Like we have a hard and fast 10-minute rule. If you call in 10 minutes or later on your coaching call, you forfeit the call. And they're not cheap calls, so people don't want to do that. And I will have people all the time, trying to bend the rules on that, or saying, I just need 10 more minutes to wrap this meeting up. And I'm like, look, this helps me protect your time and my time, because you're honoring your commitments on your calendar to hit this mark on your calendar, and same for me. And if I don't train them to think that way, and I'm constantly saying, yeah, call me in 20 minutes, I'll go find something else to do, what precedent does that set in their mind? And we also have to acknowledge, especially if we're working with business owners, they like to bend the rules, right? They like to push the envelope just a little bit. And that's not necessarily a problem on the face of it. It's about what behavior do we create or do we allow, and then it becomes a habit in a behavior that we created. Yeah. And is that what we want to tolerate? Is that what they want to tolerate? Is that really their best, if that's what they're seeking to be? So, yeah, great point.
Yeah. And speaking of that, with business owners that we work with, we were kind of starting this conversation, talking about the challenges they have, approaching the way that they're being coached, and the unique position you and I have where we get to peek behind the curtain. And not in the interest of airing people's dirty laundry, but I want to hear from you on patterns that you've noticed, especially on the business side of what you do, Chris. Patterns you've noticed with business owners, whether it be financial or leadership wise. Like, what are some of the biggest struggles that you're seeing, or the patterns that you've noticed? Because I know our audience can relate to these, and I want you to know, listening, that like, you're not alone. I think Chris and I are uniquely positioned where we're getting a ton of these same questions from people, and it's just kind of funny because we're noticing the pattern because we have the data.
I think I'm going to break them into 4 groups, because I think I'm just moving through these all day long. money, time, stress, and team, or, somehow the business and who's servicing this business. The money is the most common stressor. Very few businesses have their cash flow nailed, their lead generation nailed, their operations and systems are set, and they're just flourishing. Very few, I would say maybe 5% of all the businesses I've ever coached in have that going for them. Would you agree? That's super rare.
I would agree. Well,
yeah.
Hopefully not by the time we're done with them, no, but
absolutely,
because we're obviously the people who are going to sign up for personal training are probably not of peak health condition. You know what I mean? Like if they're already there, what are they looking for help with? What's the problem that we're solving for? So I completely agree but that is exemplary of the businesses I've dealt with. Definitely.
And it's not necessarily a problem. It's just sort of the phase of
reality.
life that their business is in, right?
Yep.
So in that regard, I see them taking all the responsibility. Like one of my top clients right now has 6 businesses and a ton of real estate investments, and the cash is flowing on some of those. And then in 2 of the main businesses, the cash is not flowing, and he is funding that personally. Talk about stress. He's not making hardly any money on the top line or on the bottom line, and working harder. So what happens to an entrepreneur who does that for 6 months straight, right? You start to get burned out. You start to bring that stress out on your family. You start to cancel vacations with your kids. You start, going gray more and more. Like there's a lot of things that start to happen. And you could speak to this on a million of your podcasts that you've already recorded. It doesn't have to be that way, right? It doesn't have to keep going that way. So that's one on the money piece. On the time piece, I see this one constantly, that they are misaligned in their priorities. So they might tell me their family is the most important thing in their life. And I say, cool, let me see your calendar this week. And guess what is not on that calendar? Family time. It's not there. They might say, it's really important to me to have a great relationship with my spouse. And I'm like, that's great. How often do you go on dates? Well, it's been 17 weeks since I made any time to go on a date, So time mismanagement, the best way I can sum that one up is, Gary Keller said this: you don't have a time management problem, you have a decision management problem. And that's where I can really step in and help people, is realigning what is the real priority, 1, 2, 3, and then what must your calendar look like to honor those priorities, including your health. That's one I see suffer there as well, because people are like, I don't have time to work out, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So let's go to the next one, stress. This one is the silent killer of business owners constantly, because they think it's normal to be stressed. They think it's normal to constantly think about work. They think it's normal to solve the problem themselves all the time, rather than delegate it back to the person they hired to fix it in the first place. And they don't realize that they are choosing their own suffering. I'm going to say that again because it's a little bit of a head scratcher, because it's like, why would I choose my own suffering? But we do. We choose our own suffering when it comes to stress, because we don't connect that our thoughts are creating that stress. Right? There's a business owner right there. I'll pick on Dan Martell, who just said in a podcast, I think last week, he doesn't see problems in his business. He sees puzzles. He gets turned on by puzzles. He likes to solve puzzles. That's fun. And he likes to bring people in and solve puzzles with him. There's another business owner who's at the same level, has the same size team, same sort of revenue and circumstantial problems that he does, going, we have all these problems. And they are running around like their hair is on fire. They're about to have a heart attack. And they're stressing themselves out based on how they're thinking. So it's really fun for me to just show people, especially over time, ways that can mitigate that stress without even changing the circumstance. We don't even have to change the market or the team, or we don't even have to necessarily go that far. But if we change how you think about it, your stress automatically comes down.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Totally. And it's not even just the business owners. I find this with my team. I've told them several times, like the accounting industry in general feeds that it helps you, like we're stress generators, we are just like creating fires so we can put them out. Yeah. And it's insane.
And don't get me wrong.
And I have consciously adopted a business that doesn't do that.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you there. I think my video cut out for a second. Okay, we're caught up? Okay. So,
Yep.
yeah, you're spot on. And I can't tell you how many of the most talented entrepreneurs and hardworking entrepreneurs I know who have not purposefully gone into their business and created more stress and created more work just to have something to do, right? Just because things
Yep.
started to get real smooth and things became systematized and predictable. And they're like, this is boring. Let's go over here and screw this up.
Yeah. 100%. And it's like you take it goes back to what you said about the time and the decision management problem, because when you say what your values are and then you don't behave incongruent with them, it communicates something totally different, but it's also not your fault, because I think we're all kind of instinctively operating in a reactive way to what is being asked of us instead of generating our own priorities. We've kind of just allowed priorities to be set by somebody else for a lot of our careers or a lot of our lives. Like, we've just been directed at that. You go here, you go there. These are your responsibilities. And we've never questioned it. But I think that when you break out of this sort of matrix of, wait a minute, I can decide that for myself. Like, it's alarmingly simple, but it is not well known.
It's not, and it's unfortunately not common. It's not what we talk about all the time. We complain out loud all the time, and we think that's the normal thing.
Right.
Before we hit record, a client was texting me. She just hired somebody. She's been putting this off for about 2 years to basically a simple virtual assistant to go through all of her emails and all the small tasks in her inbox that pile up every day. And she's like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have made this hire sooner. It's taken so much weight off my shoulders. It's taken so much stress off of me every single day. Like, why didn't I do this sooner? I'm like, well, we've been coaching on this for a long time. So why didn't you do it sooner? It's like, I think I didn't want to let somebody support me. I wanted to have that badge of, I can do this. I can figure this out. I can solve this problem and all the other problems. And at the end of the day, I can say, I checked all the boxes. And that'll get you so far, right? It's not going to get you to a scalable business. It's not going to get you to loads of free time with your hobbies and your friends and your family. And that's where I see the sort of the team ties into this, because people are blaming, money and time and stress. Oftentimes it's the team that they have created, or they have the culture they have created, whether on purpose or not. And that culture is feeding these issues, right? Instead of creating a team full of leaders who take ownership for what they do, a team full of people who seek out coaching and mentorship and education and training, and they want to improve. And they're like, just let me have it, And I think that's one of the most common misconceptions, is that it has to all fall on the two shoulders, or the shoulders of the business owner, instead of creating a real, I'd say a phalanx, like the Spartans used to do. They create basically an impenetrable tank out of their shields, but everybody has to be able to hold their shield up for that to work. And if you're not building a team that way, if you're not holding a team accountable that way, if you're not coaching them as their leader, how are they ever supposed to do it? How are they ever supposed to know to do it? Right?
Absolutely. And I think going back to so you just brought up those 4 different kind of dimensions of the challenges the business owners you come across. And the first one was money, but I feel like the money is a byproduct of the other 3.
It is. It's all a byproduct of how they think. And so that's, you were right. You said before we hit record that most people will come in saying like, I want to get, I want to increase revenue. I want to increase profitability. I want to have more free time. I want to, get my health in order. And they have these big goals. And what do we always come back to? It's how they're thinking about all this that's causing these things. Like, some of the classics, like, I have to be the one that does this. I have to be the one that signs the check. I have to be the one that cuts payroll. I have to do the sales. Nobody can do sales like me. And these just perennial limiting beliefs that hold most entrepreneurs back. And once we reorient the thoughts causing that, man, it's like, it's just a different person. It's a different business, and it can happen overnight.
Yeah. I mean, that just reminded me I had a power session with someone who was trying to quit their job. They had a side hustle. They wanted to turn into the full-time gig, and they purchased a power session with me to go through like the path to full-time business and get out of their career, because they knew I had done the same thing. We did the entire rundown of like, this is how much money it's going to take you based on your goals, your lifestyle, your cash flow need. And they said, Shannon, when can I quit my job? And my answer was 3 months ago.
I love it. I love it.
And that was my favorite. That was my absolute favorite because I was like, you're not going to like this answer. And they're like, oh no, is it 3 years from now? And I'm like, it's 3 months ago. Just put your notice in. We're done. Because what they failed to see was the momentum and the trajectory. They saw the bank account, but they didn't see that, wait, if you have this much in your bank account, and this is what you're generating with 20% or 10% of your time in here, then by default, like if you have 40 hours a week or more dedicated to this instead of 10, guess what? You're going to do so much better.
I'm going to send this episode to a client. He's going to laugh when he listens to it because this is what we were working on today. That his next opportunity is in his grasp. He just hasn't had, whatever level of courage it's going to take for him to say, yes, I'm all in.
Yeah. One of my favorite statements or questions I ask clients is, are you asking for me for the permission you don't need? Because they always ask me, like I'm the banker, right? The CFO. They'll say, do we have enough money for this? And I'm like, is that really the question? Because you have enough money for whatever you want, but what is the real question you're asking me? Because if you say, can we afford? That's actually one of my like most complicated questions people ask me is, can we afford this? And I don't know how to answer that because I go, well, what does that mean to you? Like, can we afford this? Meaning, and actually this happened with a client where they said, can I afford this? And I said, well, that depends. Can we afford to do this and keep your salary where it's at? Can we afford to do this or this or? Because the alternatives aren't there. Where I say, well, what else would you use that money for if not this? So now you just have kind of an A versus B situation. Because they say, can I afford this? I said, that is a one-dimensional question of, is there money in the bank? But what does that mean to you? If I gave you the choice of, well, your daughter can go to private school next year, not this year. You can afford it, but is it worth that price? And that's what is always challenging, is reframing those conversations out of the metric, because everybody looks at a dollar differently. Everybody looks at these numbers differently. And if you don't connect it to the goal, then I'm like, well, yeah, a piece of paper saying that you have this much money in the bank, like you can read that as well as I can, but let's really figure out what that means to you.
I do think you're absolutely on to something, that they don't really know what meaning they're prescribing to a lot of these things. What, like free time, what does that mean? Like I have clients who are like, especially if they're European, the amount of quote free time they require in their calendar is exponentially higher than what most Americans will tolerate. And so I'm like, what does that mean to you? And very few people slow down or have the gift of somebody slowing them down to say, what is your real vision? I have a session next week with somebody, and I said, look, there are 10 categories that I want you to write out. Tell me, in your ideal world where anything is possible, what does a 10 out of 10 life in this category look like? Business in this category look like? Like, just actually write out what that looks like. Because my experience of him in the past 10 years has been, he's gotten everything he's ever wanted. So if there's any sense of unhappiness or dissatisfaction, it's a matter of, well, you just haven't decided what you want next, because you're going to get it. That's just how you're hardwired. So sometimes we have to pull that vision out, of them piece by piece and have them build it in real time, because I get it. We're all busy. We're all chasing this or that, or, the next dollar, or the kids and whatever. Somebody has to slow you down and say, look, this is an investment in your future, in directing your action today to hit your goals, and clarifying things so that you don't need all this noise. I've got a client who just did this with me, and over the past 6 months has restructured his entire business, cut the workforce by about 35%. And I'm not bragging about that. That was hard for him to make that decision. And it has created so much more free time, so much more cash flow in the business to do cool things and reinvest back into the people in the business. So these opportunities come out of investing in your vision and investing in somebody who will hold your feet to that vision, feet to the fire of your vision. And I think that's where most business owners, when we talk about money, time, stress, and team, they use all of them as sort of an excuse as why they can't go hire somebody to help them with this, right?
Exactly. And the somewhat ironic approach to that is the challenges I get, we'll say as a CFO, where people say, well, I really can't afford to invest in you. And I jokingly say, how do you know that?
Ooh,
And
that's good.
right. And I say, who's told you that? And then that's kind of, that unravels the, ha ha ha. Okay, Shan.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I say, well, there are clients I've had who make it work and invest in somebody like me or someone like yourself. And there are clients who have the funds available, but just don't pull the trigger or aren't ready to take the action yet. And what I find is that there's this misunderstanding of what results they're going to get because they're not really clear on what direction they're going in. They really don't know what they're striving for. And that is probably the biggest issue, is that they're not really clear on their own goals, and therefore can't really connect this to an outcome or connect this into how it's going to turbo drive their progress toward that goal.
Yeah. It's a great question. Just how do you know that? I mean, they've sold themselves really effectively on why they can't. Have they spent any time selling themselves on how they might?
Yeah. Or it's I need to increase sales. I need to do this, I need to do that. And I know that, so as a business coach yourself, right? Talk to me for a second, because I know a lot of business coaches, and we've talked about this on the show before, but I know a lot of business coaches that are really focused on that top line revenue. Talk to me about how much time you're spending on the various aspects of, we'll say, the financial side of their business, and what sort of results you're driving. Because I know a lot of folks who focus on the marketing and lead gen and sales and all that stuff as a business coach. And I do that with air quotes, as a business coach. Talk to me about how that is more multidimensional than that.
Definitely, that's a great word to describe it, as multidimensional, because I'm looking at it like, how do I get the most amount of leverage for this client in their particular ecosystem? One of the best ways is to bring someone like you in, who is the absolute expert on this, who can help with their forecasting, who can even go back in time and claw money back from taxes that they didn't know they could, find. I'm not going to do that, and they don't want me to do that. I'm not qualified to do that. And so that's the first piece, is finding the right who to get them some, really great leverage from an expert. The next piece is focusing on profitability rather than revenue, because I can't tell you how many clients, one that I described earlier with the email assistant, the virtual assistant, she clawed back $380,000 from their budget just because we sat down and I said, just defend to me all of these expenses, right? Just pretend that you got to defend each one. Mm-hmm. And as we're going through, she's like, I can cut that in half. I can get a reduction in rates here. I can get a discount for bulk here. And so I'm not normally going to like comb through someone's budget, but if it's a perennial issue, or if it's something that I can see on the face of it, hey, look, this is what we can do real quick to get you some money. And then you can take that money and then go hire Shannon or somebody like, right? That's a great way to get some leverage. The other piece is, I'm always looking for, what is that magic lever in the business that moves everything, right? What is the one metric that they can hit that actually solves for all the other problems? It's almost always lead generation, whatever you want to call it, right? Sales, business and sales development. That's almost always the silver bullet. So I'm looking for, what is the most effective action that can be taken by this business, not necessarily the business owner, but by the business this week to make that happen. And almost always I want them to delegate that to someone else so they can come back and do what they do best, which is cast the vision to the team, coach the team, hold the money accountable, just empowering the opportunities around them, meaning going out into the world and creating opportunities for their team, for their business, for their own future, for their family. Focusing on what actually matters versus being bogged down in all these details of what doesn't matter.
I agree. Yeah. And it's just so important to have that ability to look across, like you said, it's multidimensional, but it's, not just looking at one metric and knowing how they're interrelated or how they can affect each other, to be able to drive those results. And I know, Chris, I want to be respectful of your time because then we have to run soon. But can you tell our audience about what you got coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for letting me share this. So June 7th and 8th in Louisville, Kentucky, this is 2024, June 7th and 8th, I'm hosting another round of what I call Bourbon and Breakthroughs. It's a 2-day, essentially mastermind or roundtable in-person event where business owners come down to Louisville and we spend 2 days coaching, masterminding, real-time problem solving on their life, on their business. You wouldn't believe how many times I hear at the end of the event, like, I feel so much better knowing everybody else is struggling with the same things. And it's everything we're talking about here today, except for we're coaching through them and getting them real results in real time. After we do all that, we have fun with bourbon. I'm in, the bourbon capital of the world, Kentucky. And it's just something fun to do where we taste all these rare bourbons. I get to interview some industry legends on their business and the huge risks that they take in their world to inspire these entrepreneurs that they can stick their neck a little further out and find. Fantastic dining as well. We are eating at some of the finest restaurants in the entire country. And half of this whole thing is hosted in the world's largest American whiskey bar. They have over 2,000 different bottles of American whiskey. Nothing Japanese, no Scotch, nothing like that. It's all American stuff, which is it's fun. It's a really inspiring environment to be in. And then on day 2, we go out and we do some distillery tours and I interview some of the master distillers. We'll even pull bourbon right out of the barrel, and you can put it in your own bottle and take that bottle home and get it signed by the master distiller. But, at the end of the day, it's called Bourbon and Breakthroughs because my whole goal is that they have a massive breakthrough in their life and their business, and they make these connections to other business owners who can help them forever, not just for that one weekend. So it's a blast. Like I said, it's June 7th and 8th this year, and you can go to goodmancoachinginc.com and scroll down to events and you can see it there. Or honestly, the fastest way to find it is just Google search bourbon and breakthroughs. And,
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much for letting me talk about it. I get really amped up about it because it's a blast and everybody leaves happy. We have like 99% of the time people say they got 10x their ticket investment. So it's just a lot of fun.
And I love that you were describing it and like basically sold me on it. And and then on day 2, and I was like, what? So this sounds amazing, guys. Check it out. There's a link in the show notes to learn more about Bourbon and Breakthroughs and to work with Chris. Chris, you're just an awesome human. I love talking to you. I love that we have such great conversation, and I hope we have more of them on the show. Thank you so much.
Same to you, and thank you so much for the opportunity. Let's get round 4 queued up. Let's do it again.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon.